Mick Dahlman spent 40 years in silence before returning to this remote Tasmanian bay. He is here to confront a trauma he has kept private since he was 18 years old. In 1973, Mick was the youngest of 10 crewmen aboard the Blythe Star. It was a routine coastal freighter carrying keg beer and phosphate for a short journey. In the night, the ship began tilting onto its side. Mick fell from his bunk to find a corridor already filling with water. The vessel capsized so quickly that the captain never reached the radio. No distress call was ever transmitted. When a ship sinks without a MayDay, the crew isn't just battling the ocean. They are fighting the fact that, to the rest of the world, they haven't even gone missing yet. All 10 men managed to climb into a single rubber life raft. They watched the Blythe Star's bow rise into the air before the ship disappeared. Maritime tracking in the 1970s was guesswork. Without an intended route, authorities split their resources into 2 massive search zones around Tasmania. Aircraft flew miles away, searching empty stretches of ocean, while the men's raft drifted further south. The era's rescue systems had failed. Survival now depended entirely on the isolation of the raft. For 8 days, the raft was at the mercy of the Tasman Sea. The men drifted 400 kilometers through freezing temperatures and swells so large they crushed the sides of the raft together, throwing the crew into one another. At one point, a Japanese fishing vessel appeared nearby. The crew fired a flare, only to watch the ship turn and sail away, leaving them alone in the dark. After days without his medication, the second engineer, John Sloan, passed away. His crewmates held his body for 2 days before they were forced to bury him at sea. By the 8th day, the crew was suffering from severe delirium. In their exhaustion, they drank their final cans of fresh water under the shared hallucination that they were drinking beer. Survival becomes an exhausting effort to stay focused as the environment works to extinguish hope. On the 8th day, the raft finally hit land at Deep Glen Bay. Trapped on a narrow strip of sand, they were boxed in by cliffs and dense forest. While the men stood on the shore, the authorities on the mainland officially called off the search. They concluded the ship had sunk with all hands. On the beach, the group's leader, Ken Jones, and chief engineer John Eagles both succumbed to hypothermia. Both men were found having stripped off their clothing, a common, tragic symptom of the final stages of the condition. 7 survivors remained, but they realized that staying on this beach meant waiting for their own turn to die. Mick took a knife and cut up the life raft. He fashioned the rubber into crude ponchos and wrapped several layers around his feet to serve as shoes. They were leaving the only shelter they had for a near impossible trek through the wilderness. Mick, Malcolm, and Al began to climb. They fought through the jungle, at a pace of just a few meters an hour, pushing through dense scrub to reach the top of the cliffs. After hours of walking, they stumbled onto a dirt logging road. When a truck finally rounded the corner, the 3 exhausted men stood their ground and flagged it down. The driver was initially suspicious of the bedraggled men in rubber vests. When they claimed to be from the Blythe Star, he told them it was impossible. The news of their survival reached the mainland just as families were preparing memorial services. Mothers and wives received phone calls from men they had already begun to mourn. The 3 men had reached help on their own terms, forcing a rescue that the authorities had already decided was impossible. This disaster led to the creation of AUSREP, a mandatory system requiring ships to log coordinates with a central hub every 24 hours. If a ship fails to check in, search teams have a verified breadcrumb trail to launch a targeted search within hours. This protocol, saving countless lives since 1973, is the legacy of the 3 fallen men. Returning to Deep Glen Bay with his children, Mick finally shared the full story of the ordeal. He did it to ensure the families of his crewmates finally knew the truth. The scars of the Blythe Star remain, but the legacy of the crew's endurance is a safety network that helps ensure seafarers are no longer left to drift without a trace.